It will be enormously expensive and hugely disruptive to reduce worldwide greenhouse gas emissions by the amounts the global warming movement wants. The worldwide economic recession won't make it any easier. Assume, though, we could still scrape together $1 trillion or so to help humanity. Assume as well that man-made global warming is indeed a serious problem. Would the huge cost of reducing CO2 emissions provide the greatest good for the greatest number of people? A former Greenpeace activist began asking that question 12 years ago and has since turned it into his own crusade for, he says, common sense.
I used to be this left-wing guy in Denmark, a member of Greenpeace, not out in a rubber boat, but just worrying intensely about the environment and being very annoyed about the right-wing government in Denmark not doing enough for environment and so on.
But Bjorn Lomborg says he also wanted to be sure of the facts. So he began studying the issues and concluded, he says, that all in all, the world nowadays was actually better off than he had figured.
We have better fed, we live longer, we have higher incomes, we're better educated, and actually in many instances in developed countries, air pollution has gone down, water pollution has gone down, we have more protective forests. This doesn't mean there are not lots of problems in our societies and in the world at large, but it means we can start talking about where can you do the most good first.
And Lomborg says that's been his mission ever since. In 2004, he formed what he called the Copenhagen Consensus, gathering some of the world's top economists, including 4 Nobel laureates, and asking them a key question.
How much do you get if you spend trillions of dollars on climate change? How much good do you actually do for future generations versus if you spent that money on helping the very obvious problems that we have right now?
The panel's answer was a shocker for global warming activists.
They made a ranked list of all the great things you can do in the world, and what they showed was a quarter of everyone who dies on this planet this year dies from easily curable infectious diseases. Maybe we should do something about that. Malnutrition, it's about getting free trade, getting successful research and development in agricultural technologies, and on and on. At the very bottom of the list was cut carbon emissions. It's one of the things that we all talk about, but it's actually one of the least effective ways to help the world.
Well, we're told the ice caps are melting, the seas are rising.
And I think that's part of the information that's not very helpful in building and understanding how we need to deal with climate change. Now, if the world really was scary, maybe we should say so, but it's not. The UN Climate Panel estimate that sea level rise will be somewhere between 1/2 and 2 feet of sea level rise over the next...
or 2 feet?
Between 1/2 foot and 2 feet
not
over the
20
next
feet.
Over the next 100 years, till 2100.
Not 20 feet.
Not 20 feet.
Have we been panicked?
I think so, very much. We know how big of a challenge a foot of sea level rise is, because over the last 150 years, sea levels rose about a foot. And so we can see, well, we dealt with that pretty effectively.
And Lomborg says cutting worldwide carbon emissions, on the other hand, is jaw-droppingly expensive.
The economists are actually very, very clear in this. If we follow the current path, reduce our temperatures to 2 degrees centigrade, which is what even Obama has signed up to, the cost is going to be a phenomenal $40 trillion per year at the end of the century.
$40 trillion.
$40 trillion. Oxfam, one of the organizations that help third world countries, they actually had an amazing statistic. They pointed out that governments are starting to talk about taking $50 billion away from development aid and spending it on climate change policies. The amazing thing is they claim that for that $50 billion, we could save 4.3 million kids. On the other hand, if we spend it on climate change policies, even if we did it in the most effective manner, we could postpone global warming by the end of the century by about 6 hours.
So what does Lomborg think we should do about global warming? Invest for the long term instead of wasting money on what he calls ineffective short-term solutions.
We should cut carbon emissions by investing dramatically in research and development so we have technologies to pick up the slack and make a dramatic reduction in, say, 20 to 40 years.
The problem we're up against is there's very little time.
British columnist and environmental activist George Monbiot is one of many environmentalists who charge that Lomborg underestimates the impact of global warming.
Let's see what's already taken place. Most of the world's glaciers are in retreat. You can see this for yourself. If you go to the Rocky Mountains, you see photos of a glacier taken 50, 60 years ago, and you stand in the same spot and compare it to today. It's a huge change. We see the summer sea ice in the Arctic, retreating in a very steady progression. It's a terrifying picture when you see all that put together. The only thing which can affect that reality is for us to reduce our production of greenhouse gases.
We're claiming we're going to cut right now. We put up these windmill farms or these solar panels farms, and we feel good about it. We spend it on things that cost a lot and end up doing very little good for the climate. That's stupid.
Do you sometimes feel that you're tilting at windmills?
Tilting windmills, as I understand it, means that you don't ever get anywhere. But I think if you speak in a calm voice that's reasoned with the best economic evidence that we have, that, I think, actually pulls people back in. And I think people will come around and say, we'd like a better policy, please.
Coming up, climate, controversy, and the Congress. The House passes a bill to drastically reduce carbon emissions. What would those cuts mean for everyday Americans? You might be surprised after the break.